Today, we're jumping into the powerful story of one man, his incredible ideals, his devastating fall, and the long, quiet journey he took to come back from the very brink. So, picture this, a village called ÇÖKÜŞ, a place so green and peaceful that time itself just seems to slow down. But for a young man named Süleyman, this perfect little world was never, ever going to be enough. His dreams were just way too big for this small valley. I mean, we're talking about a journey that takes him from these beautiful, peaceful fields all the way to the darkest prison cells you can imagine. He goes from being a beloved, ambitious son to a man who lost absolutely everything. And that really brings us to the core question of his story, right? How does a person find their way back after a quiet, complete, and total collapse? Well, let's dive in and find out.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, with Süleyman's youth in ÇÖKÜŞ, where his ambition was just on a completely different wavelength than the slow, gentle life of his village.
Even as a kid, he was different. He was drawn to social issues, to the power of books, and his passion for printing, for spreading ideas, really set him apart and fueled this burning desire to leave his small world behind.
And this guy's will was just unbelievable. He'd walk for miles to get to school, study on a totally empty stomach. His friends even nicknamed him Bookless because he was so poor. But that determination, it paid off. He became the very first person from his village to ever get into a university. So he gets to university, and that passion for knowledge, it just explodes into a passion for justice. And, well, that's when everything changes, with some really severe, life-altering consequences. And it happened fast. One minute, he's reading Marx and Lenin. The next, he's out there printing and handing out leaflets. Before you knew it, the state had branded him an enemy, and he was being hunted down and brutally beaten. And get this, even when he's in a rigged court, you know where the sentence is already decided, he doesn't back down. Not one bit. He stands up and boldly declares, "You who are afraid of ideas want to silence me with iron bars?" That one moment of defiance pretty much sealed his fate.
And you just have to see the difference between the two worlds he was living in. On one hand, he was fighting for a world as beautiful and peaceful as those streams back in his village. But on the other, the reality he was forced into was just horrifying, including torture methods literally designed to cause permanent injury.
So after years of this brutality, he finally gets a pardon. He's released, but coming home? Yeah, that wasn't the fairy tale ending he might have been hoping for.
You know, the village had changed, or maybe he had. The older folks, they welcomed him back with open arms. But the younger generation, they were wary. They saw him as this anarchist, this troublemaker.
So what does he do? He tries to bring his passion for ideas back home. He turns this old granary into a library, a book reading house for the village kids. But instead of being celebrated, it was met with pure fear. Rumors started flying that he was poisoning their minds, turning them against their families.
And it all came to a head after another arrest on bogus charges. The village headman basically gave him an ultimatum: shut it down and get out. Just like that, his dream of changing his own community from the inside, it was crushed. So, what happens when a man like that, a man full of fire and ideals, is completely defeated? Well, he gives up. He abandons his politics, settles down, starts a family. But all that energy, that fire, it had to go somewhere, and it turned inward. That's when a totally different kind of threat appeared. Not from the government, not from the village, but from inside himself. We're talking about a gambling addiction.
And it's a classic story of how these things happen, right? It starts small, just a harmless game of checkers at the coffee house. Then he gets a few small wins, and suddenly there's this glimmer of hope, maybe a way out of poverty. But then the obsession takes over. He's losing more than he's winning. The trust with his family is just crumbling, until finally he loses everything. His land, his money, all of it gone.
And the cost wasn't just financial. It was the quiet collapse of his family. You have his daughter, Zeynep, writing these stories about a fallen hero, just hoping the dad she remembered would come back. And his son, Ali. He just goes silent, creating this huge distance, because the father who used to play with him was just gone.
The rock-bottom moment. It comes at this high-stakes tournament. He loses it all, and his rival just twists the knife, humiliating him in front of everyone. Those words, "You're finished. You ruined the lives of 3 people." Just devastating. And that's it. He's completely broken. He runs off into the mountains thinking about ending it all, and he just screams into the night, a cry of pure, absolute despair.
But sometimes you have to hit the absolute bottom before you can even think about climbing back up.
But you know what? That moment of complete darkness, that was actually the beginning of something new. It was the start of a slow, painful journey to rebuild, not just his own life, but his entire village.
And that first step, it wasn't some grand gesture. He picked up a shovel and went back to the fields. His hands, blistered and soft after years away from that kind of work, were this constant, painful reminder of everything he'd lost and how far he had to go.
Now, here's where the story takes a turn you wouldn't expect. Instead of hiding in shame, he walks right up to the people he owes money to, and he proposes this wild idea. What if we work together? What if we form a cooperative and lift all of us out of this debt?
And it worked. The change was incredible. He gets the farmers organized, they start selling their produce in the big cities, he leads the charge to build a new school for the kids, he becomes this trusted leader, the village wise man. He finally found what he was looking for, not in big ideologies, but in his family and his community.
So, Süleyman's story really makes you think, doesn't it? What's the real measure of a life? Is it about how high your dreams are, or is it about how you recover when you fall? Maybe, just maybe, true strength isn't about never failing, but about having the courage to rebuild, piece by piece, from the absolute ruins.